perfect day to talk about how to make better relationships. And I'm not going to just focus on romantic relationships. So if you're not in one, don't worry, this isn't going to exclude you from the discussion. So I have several things that can help you in all your different relationships, whether it's family, friendships, or with your spouse, and with yourself. Also, I'm going to talk about relating well to yourself. So one of the things that you need to do in all of your relationships, even with yourself, is to make sure that you communicate things very clearly. Try not to be vague, especially with other people. Sometimes we expect other people to read us and read our minds, or read between the lines of what we're saying, or we drop hints. That is the worst thing that you can do to have successful relationships. That goes for coworkers as well, or employees. Make sure that you communicate clearly and check with the other person to make sure that they understood what you meant. Because sometimes people will interpret what you say through a filter of their own experiences, and they'll completely misunderstand what you were trying to say. So it's always good to make sure that people understand you. That's reflective listening. Did you understand what I meant by that? Check with people and make sure they understand. For example, if you know you want something for Valentine's Day, you can hint, but hint clearly. I would love to get a bouquet of flowers or a steak dinner for Valentine's Day. Make sure you say that out loud. Now, those are not the things I would ask for from my husband, but he knows what I would prefer for any kind of gifts that I'm getting, because I'll tell him. I'll tell him exactly what I would like so that he doesn't have to guess, because it's a lot of work to have to guess what people want. So clearly communicate what you want and what you expect and what works for you, and do it with love. Everything that you communicate, you can do gently and with love, with the expectation that the other person can do well. And you want to help them do well, and that's part of relating well and with grace with other people. You need to give them all the information they need to be able to do well and be successful in the relationship too. So listen carefully. That's one of the greatest things that you can do to relate well to others, to employees, to your children, to your family members. Listen without in your head constantly going, what am I going to say next? Just put that aside and listen very carefully to what they're saying, and then make sure you understand them. From what I'm hearing, this is what I'm hearing you say. I understand that you mean this. Do you mean that you really want me to clean the kitchen every single day? Ask them to make sure that you understand them, because if you misunderstand and don't tell them so, they're not going to be able to correct you, and you'll continue in this misunderstanding. Misunderstandings usually come from poor communication and from people not taking the time to truly listen. Listen past the words for the feelings behind the word. And when you reflect that you understand the person is feeling frustrated, that sounds very frustrating. That's better than resolving a problem when someone is talking about having a hard day at work or a hard day at school. Don't tell your children immediately how to resolve the issue. Listen to them and say, wow, that sounds very frustrating. I'm sorry that you're going through that. Or it sounds like you're having a hard time in math. That must be really hard. How do you feel about that? And then listen to how they feel and validate their feelings before you give a resolution to the answer. Because people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That goes for business, that goes for friendships, and it goes for your relationships with your children and your family. Communicate that you care enough to take the time to listen to what's going on with them before you try to give them advice. Sometimes people don't even want advice at all, and you should ask. You should get people's permission before you give them advice when you're listening. Set boundaries, though. You are not the solution to everyone else's problems, and you need to recognize that and be okay with it. Boundaries by John Townsend and Henry Cloud is a must read if you haven't read it. They have specific ones for parenting and for spouses and for family relationships and for business and for any kind of boundary situation that you have. Boundaries does not mean standing with a pitchfork at the end of yourself and saying no one can come in. It doesn't mean setting up walls. It simply means I understand where I stop and you begin, where my responsibility ends and yours needs to pick up. I'm responsible for my thoughts, my feelings, my words, and my actions, not yours. And you are not in control of, or nor should you feel responsible for me. So knowing the difference between what I'm responsible for and what you're responsible for, and communicating what I'm willing to do in the situation and what I'm not willing to do in the situation, rather than saying, this is what you must do. Because if you're telling other people what to do, that is stepping past the line a little bit. You need to say, if you do this, then I will be willing to do that. That's you saying what you're willing to do, rather than you trying to control. So it's very important that you recognize you're in control of you and not in control of others, and others should not be imposing their responsibility upon you. So set boundaries and know what that means. If you don't know, again, go and read the book. It's really good and it has a lot of great stuff in it. It goes greater in depth, and I have before in other posts gone in greater depth, but that would take the entire blog post if I went into too much depth on that. But basically you want to demonstrate respect. That's another way to have healthy relationships. Demonstrate ultimate respect for other people. You don't have to agree with someone to respect them. And you don't have to agree with what they do to respect them. You don't have to believe in all the same lifestyle choices that somebody else believes in order to respect that they are a valuable individual. You can say, I love you, I care about you, I value you as a person, but I don't agree with you doing X. And that can be okay. We should learn to be okay with not having the same values and still caring about each other. So show respect for the person. That doesn't mean you have to respect everything in their value system that they agree with. You don't have to agree with every single point. So balance truth and grace. That's another important point, and that goes with respect. You need to be able to tell the truth in love, and love with truth. It's important to balance both of those. We should be able to love unconditionally, but you also need to set limits, because it's not in people's best interest to deny them the truth. When someone is living in a way that's unhealthy and toxic for them, it's not loving to pretend it's okay. It's not loving to say, hey, drink yourself to death. I love you. I hope that you keep drinking every morning, all afternoon, and all night, every day. Great, good on you. That's not loving. That's like saying, I hope you die. You don't have to agree with something somebody does. In fact, you should be willing to say, because I love you, I hope that you'll consider better life choices. You don't have to harp on it. You don't have to pound on it. But they need to know where you stand on that issue because you love them. It's not loving to pretend everything that that person is doing is in their best interest if it's not. So be willing to speak the truth. So give what costs your heart. What costs your heart is the greatest gift you can give. You can give things that cost money. You can give things that are going to look expensive or polished. But what costs your heart is going to be the most valuable gift you can give. That can be a gift of time. That can be gifts of listening. That can be making something that you're talented at making. But when it costs your heart to take the moment to listen, to serve that person, to rub their feet, to really, really care in ways that show it was expensive for you, not showing a lack of boundaries, but that it's really costing your heart something, that you're sacrificing your vulnerability, you're being intimate, you're being truthful about who you are as a person, you're sharing from your heart. And there are circles of intimacy that that person needs to earn before you get more and more intimate emotionally with them. You need to make sure that they've earned the right to hear deeper and deeper things about you and to share deeper and deeper things about you. There are wide circles. That would be the whole world. Some of the things that we put on the internet is a little bit too much, and you don't need to share everything on the internet with the whole world. There should be earned intimacy where people get gradually closer and closer as they show that they can be trusted with that information. And when they're trustworthy, then you can let them in closer. But it doesn't mean you never trust anyone. You just give people an opportunity to be in that circle of trust with you. So apologize without excuses if you do something wrong, and that goes for your children too. Parents, it's so hard to admit you're wrong to your children, but when you do, it models for them how to have integrity and how to take responsibility for their behavior. So when you're willing to say, I was wrong, without a but you shouldn't have, just say, I was wrong. That was the wrong way to do it. And move on and say, here's what I'm going to do instead. Make sure you own your own mistakes and don't try to push it off on the other person. I know it's really hard to do, but it's important. It's not a legitimate apology if you had a but. You should have at the end and make an excuse. But it was only because. That's not really an apology. So feel free to forgive yourself though, and you should love yourself the way that you love God and love other people. Those things are all interconnected. So forgive yourself. And forgive other people to free yourself. The purpose of forgiveness is not to set someone else free. They're still going to be accountable for their behavior, whether you're bitter against them or not. Your resentment and bitterness only imprisons you. So forgiveness is to free yourself. Reconciliation is a completely different animal. And that is what you do to restore a relationship that's worth restoring. If you need to restore that relationship because it's a valuable, important part of your life, then that's where reconciliation will come in. Some people you'll need to forgive, but you don't need to reconcile with. You can forgive the child molester, but you don't need to invite him over for dinner because he's not trustworthy enough to have in your house. So those people would be, you forgive them, you let God judge them, you let the court system handle it, but you don't invite them back over again. That's not a safe thing to do. So true love must cherish God, self, and others. Neglect of any of those parts is going to affect all of the parts. So make sure that you are cherishing yourself. Love yourself. If you don't love yourself, you're not going to be able to love other people. Make sure that you are good with God because that's where the love comes from. And make sure that you are loving others because chances are, if you're having a hard time loving others, there's a problem also in your relationship with yourself and in your relationship with God. So check all those pieces and make sure they're healthy because when one's not healthy, it's impacting the others whether you realize it or not. Reconcile when you need to, but always with yourself. You should always try to make peace with yourself and always make peace with God. Now, check all of your relationships. That includes with your family, with your kids, with your extended family, with your friends, with your spouse, and with yourself for the following very important and vital elements. And you might recognize where these come from. I did not make them up. They've been around for thousands of years. Patience. Are you patient with your family, with your friends, with your spouse, with yourself? Kindness. Are your thoughts toward yourself and others kind? Are you envious? Is there jealousy? What about bragging? Is that part of any of those relationships? Pride, considering yourself more important or more significant, or somebody else more important or more significant than you. Insults, accusations, humiliation, or otherwise dishonoring somebody. And that includes yourself. Selfishness, thinking about yourself too much, whether it's a negative thought or a positive thought. Short-tempered, easily angered. Do you have a short fuse with certain people, including yourself? What about keeping a record of wrongdoing or slights? Is there that one person that you could just list off every bad thing they've ever done? That should not be in your love relationships. And that includes yourself. If you keep a bad record of things that you've done, then you are not being kind and loving toward yourself. Are you smug when somebody screws up? Are you delighting in evil? Are you looking for them to make a mistake? Are you celebrating honesty and truth in that relationship? Are you being honest with yourself? Are you encouraging other people to be honest with you and celebrating when they're honest even if it's about something that they did wrong. Your children, when they come to you and they've been honest, you should reward that, even if it's when they've done something wrong, and especially if it's hard to be honest with you about having done something wrong. Are you always protective of others? Are you always protective of your own heart and being kind to yourself? Are you hope-filled? Are you always hope-filled in that relationship? Do you believe that those relationships have value and hope? Persevering through the challenges of those relationships, even when it's hard, just continuing to work on that relationship and restore it. Think about intimacy as intimacy, and that's been around a while. I also did not make that up, but that's a good one. You should have those circles where people see deeper and deeper into you as they earn the right to be trusted. Another thing I want to tell you about successful relationships is you play to establish relationships. Relationships are based on play. So if you want to get closer with someone and you're having a difficult time connecting with them, make time to go play. And you'll be surprised at how much closer you feel and how much better that relationship is after you've played together. And choose something that you both like to do, or something they like to do, and then they choose something you like to do, and see if it's something that you can maybe overlap where you didn't realize you could. But there are lots of fun things that adults can do to play. You can go build a sandcastle. You can go paint together. You can do a craft together. You can go do a cooking class or dance or listen to music, or do karaoke, or go for a walk, or go explore a garden. Do something that's fun for both of you. Maybe you're sports oriented and you like doing those kinds of things. But find things that are playful and fun that you can do together. Even a comedy movie or comedy show is a form of play because you're laughing together. So find things that you can do where you can play. Adults don't play enough, and it's so important for our brain health, our emotional health, and our spiritual health to play and have fun. Grow into your potential by following the model of love. God gives us this great model of love, of unconditional love, but He does set boundaries. So grow into that. Pay attention to Him and listen to Him. Journal your monthly heart evaluations. Take a journal and assess how well this month you've loved yourself, loved God, and loved other people, and see if it's better than last month. So if you're struggling, though, with any of these things, you know you can call a life coach or a therapist or a pastor or somebody in your life that's wise, that's older than you, and get some support. Get somebody to help you out and help you get through these difficult times. Well, that's all I had for today. I'm so thankful that you joined. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time. Have a great week. See you next time. Bye-bye.